They called me Bluebell. Not because I was soft, far from it. It was the name stenciled on my ambulance, painted in chipped blue letters that had weathered 2 tours, 3 engine overhauls, and more shrapnel than I cared to count. But mostly, it was a name they could forget. Easy to laugh at, easier to ignore. The convoy crawled across the dry Saclawea plains under the morning haze. 3 armored trucks up front, then me in the rear, the rolling medic. I drove in silence, eyes on the horizon, watching for shapes that didn't belong. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, even as dust kicked up like fog from the lead vehicle. I'd memorized every rattle of my rig, every twitch in the suspension. If something fell off, I'd know before the instruments did. Liberty Gate, this is Med 2, came the call over the radio. Approaching North Checkpoint. No contacts. ETA 4 minutes. I answered calmly. Med 2 copies. All stable. No incidents. The checkpoint guards barely looked up as we passed. Just another uneventful supply run. I parked Bluebell in the motor pool and began my post-run checks, a habit more than an order. Fuel levels, tire pressure, brake responsiveness. Every system got touched, tested. No one else cared, but it mattered to me. In my line of work, order saved lives. A few meters away, Sergeant Colin Trask and his unit were unloading their gear with all the grace of a loud bar brawl. Trask had that kind of overconfidence that comes with surviving just enough gunfights to think he was invincible. His squad mirrored him, fast-talking, faster with judgment. Hey, heard we're stuck with nurse wheels again on the next op, Private Maddox muttered while slinging his rifle. The others laughed. Trask grinned. As long as she drives in a straight line and doesn't try to lead the charge, we'll survive. Girl's got more mileage than the engine she's in, Corporal Kim added. But 0 combat hours. I crouched by Bluebell's side, pretending I hadn't heard a word. But I heard everything. I always did. None of it was new. I was the extra, the one assigned to haul the wounded, not to take fire. I didn't wear rank-like armor, and I didn't raise my voice unless I had to. So to them, I was invisible. But I'd served in places that didn't exist on maps. I'd held pressure on arteries while mortars fell. I'd watched a team bleed out because help came 2 minutes too late. And I never forgot the look in their eyes, the ones who died while others played soldier. Chief Nolan Beck, the base maintenance lead, watched me from the tool bay. He always lingered after these runs, like he saw something others didn't. One night, long after the floodlights clicked off and the base quieted, he walked over. You rearranged your loadout again, he said. Efficiency, I answered without looking up. Tourniquets near the left panel. Trauma kits behind the cab. I want everything reachable with one hand. Beck crouched beside me. You didn't learn that from any field manual I've ever read. I met his eyes for the first time. Old habits, I said simply. Some of us trained differently. He didn't ask more. Just nodded and walked off, quiet as always. 3 days later, we got the briefing. Enemy movement increasing. Disconnected groups suddenly coordinating. Locals falling silent. Same story, new day. Higher-ups called for alertness, tighter patrols, protocol drills. Most treated it like background noise. But I felt the change in the air. The kind of stillness that means something's about to shatter. That night, I checked my gear again. I didn't sleep. I walked the perimeter, memorized alleyways and fallback routes. The nurses thought I was just nervous. But I wasn't nervous. I was ready. The night it began, I was already half-dressed, boots laced, rifle cleaned. A storm was coming, not the kind you could see on radar, the kind you feel in your bones. It was 0243 hours when the first blast hit. The ground shook like it had been punched by the sky itself. I was on my feet before the second explosion sounded. Fuel depot. Then the comms relay. Each strike precise, like they were reading a blueprint of our base. Not harassment, annihilation. Screams erupted across Liberty Outpost. Sirens wailed, but they were already too late. I tore through the smoke and chaos toward Bluebell, my ambulance bathed in flickering red from emergency strobes. The radio inside was alive with static and panic. All units, this is command. Multiple breaches, north and east walls. QRF en route to Sector 3. Mass casualties expected. Med teams prep for evac. I grabbed the mic. Medical 2 is rolling. Where do you need me? Hold at the field clinic, came the strained reply. Wounded inbound. Triage station is under pressure. Copy. I shifted into gear and slammed the accelerator. As I reached the makeshift aid post, Tracers lit the sky like cursed fireworks. Small arms fire danced against concrete walls, cutting into our safe zone like a buzzsaw. Soldiers screamed, bled, crumpled in the dirt. That's when I saw Trask and his boys. They were pinned down behind a shipping container near the east wall, trying to lay down cover. Trask still barked orders, but his swagger was gone. Now he looked like what he was, a man trying not to die. I parked the rig and stepped out as bullets cracked nearby. A medic waved me down. 3 urgent, he shouted. Spinal trauma, femoral bleed, abdominal puncture. They won't make it without surgical evac. I scanned the path between us and the hardened clinic. 300 meters of open ground, now swept by machine gun fire from the eastern ridge. Death alley. I'll take them, I said, already swinging open the back hatch. Wait, you can't. The medic tried, but I was already inside, locking down straps, checking vitals, and confirming everything was secure. If they died on the road, it wouldn't be from sloppy prep. The minute I stomped on the gas, gunfire stitched the sand ahead. One bullet shattered the side mirror. Another pinged off the armor panel by my door. The entire cab rattled from near hits. I didn't flinch. I pushed Bluebell hard, weaving between obstacles, dodging wreckage and fire. At one point I swerved past a burning Humvee, the heat licking across the windshield. I thought about nothing. Not the gunfire, not the pain waiting inside those patients. Just the route, the math, the next second. We made it. Backed into the surgical bay, doors flung open, medics flooded in and pulled the wounded out with efficiency that bordered on violence. No ceremony, just saving lives. The radio barked again. More incoming. Same route. I'm on it. I ran that gauntlet 5 times. Each trip worse than the last. Shrapnel cracked my windshield. An RPG landed so close on run for I lost hearing in my left ear. But I didn't stop. Because people were alive who wouldn't have been if I did. Then came run 6. The aid station itself came under direct fire. A mounted PKM heavy gun opened up from the ridge. Higher ground we thought was clear. Rounds tore through sandbags, splintered pallets, punched holes through everything that wasn't concrete. We were pinned. And the moment stretched into silence, that dangerous kind, when everyone realizes they're about to die. We can't move, someone said. Guns got full coverage of the corridor. We need air support. Mortars are busy. We're alone. And that's when I looked at the drainage culvert. Low to the ground. Concrete lined. Meant for runoff, but wide enough to crawl. And it led right beneath that ridge. Give me 8 minutes, I said. They looked at me like I was insane. Evac's dead if we don't clear that gun. I'm going. Riley. Trask started, but stopped when he saw my face. No jokes. No swagger now. Just fear. And something else. Trust, maybe. Or the echo of something close. I grabbed my rifle and crawled into the dark. The drainage culvert was 3 feet high, a concrete artery cutting beneath the edge of Liberty Outpost. Rats had used it. Water had once flowed through it. Now it would carry me straight beneath the ridge where death was waiting behind a PKM. I dropped flat and crawled. My rifle, an M4 tuned better than regulation required, stayed tight against my chest. Each movement was silent, practiced. I moved like I'd done this before, because I had. Just not here. Not under this name. The air grew colder as I advanced. The sound of gunfire overhead echoed down like thunder in a tunnel, disorienting, but I stayed focused. I counted each handspan forward. 1 meter. 10. 30. My breath stayed level. My heart calm. At 60 meters, I reached the spillway and paused. Above, the gun barked again. I could see the faint orange flicker of muzzle flashes through the slits in the rock wall. 3 silhouettes. A gunner, a loader, and a spotter watching the base. Professional. Efficient. Trained. But they weren't watching behind them. I emerged slowly, quietly, behind a natural outcrop that gave me cover. I had 8 seconds to line up the shots. No hesitation. No noise. The first went down instantly. Suppressed round, center mass, then a second in the neck. The loader turned too late. His scream cut off by 2 taps to the sternum. The spotter raised his weapon. He was fast. I was faster. 3 bodies crumpled into silence, the PKM finally going still. I moved up, swept the position, cleared the weapons, then turned the gun toward the ridge trail in case more came. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't need a chain of command. I had a job. I clicked the radio. Liberty Medical, this is Shaw. Nest neutralized. Route is clear. Begin evac. Static, then a reply. Riley? Say again? You heard me. The comms went quiet, then exploded in controlled chaos. Movement resumed. Medics scrambled. Evacuation restarted. And me? I stayed there. I used the captured PKM to cover the ridge, suppressing any enemy movement. Twice, I saw figures dart through the brush, and I put rounds near their feet. Let them know I was watching. Let them guess if there were more like me out here. There weren't. Just me. I held that ground for 40 minutes. By the time the Apaches arrived, their rotors slicing open the smoke-filled sky, the base had regained partial control. Rockets screamed down onto fleeing targets. The enemy formation buckled, then scattered, leaving behind wreckage and wounded in silence. And then I stood, gathered my rifle, and walked down the hill like a ghost from a different war. When I reached the aid station, the smoke was finally beginning to lift. Fires still burned in pockets. Ammo cooked off in distant cracks. But the worst had passed. For now, Sergeant Noah Price met me outside the triage tent. He was covered in blood, not his own, and his hands still trembled slightly. The kind of tremble you get after realizing you almost lost too many. 3 of those kids made it to surgery because of you, he said, staring at me like he was seeing a ghost. All stable. I nodded. Good. He hesitated, then added, Where'd you learn to shoot like that? I didn't answer. Behind him, Sergeant Trask stood with his fire team. Their faces, the same ones who'd laughed about Nurse Wheels, were pale now, mouths half open like they couldn't decide whether to salute or apologize. Trask took a step forward. You took out that ridge by yourself, he said slowly. We all heard it. We saw the cover fire. He was trying to square the woman he mocked with the soldier who just saved his life. Soldiers don't usually do that alone, he added. No, I said. They don't. Before he could speak again, a Humvee rolled in. The side door opened, and out stepped Lieutenant Commander Hazel Boyd, the base's acting CO. But she wasn't alone. The man next to her wore civilian fatigues, but he walked like he'd spent his life in forward zones. Hardlined face. Neutral expression. Intelligence services, no question. This is Cole Jensen, Department of Defense Intelligence, Boyd said. He needs a word with you, Staff Sergeant. I met his eyes, and there it was. Recognition. He knew who I was, or who I used to be. Walk with me, he said, voice low. We didn't go far. Just behind the vehicle bay, where the noise faded and the wind could carry nothing. Boyd followed, along with Chief Beck, who clearly wasn't leaving this conversation to speculation. Let's get to it, Jensen said, pulling out a tablet. Your personnel file says you're a field medic, motor transport certified, for years logistics. I stayed quiet. But, he continued, I have clearance to access secondary personnel archives, the ones that don't show up on standard base systems. He tapped the screen. Your Tier 7 clearance. Attached to Operation Gray Washington deployed with task units Delta, Mako, and Shadow. Confirmed active in 187 missions across Syria, Ukraine, Somalia, and others that aren't listed. Boyd blinked. That can't be right. It is, Jensen said. Riley Shaw isn't just a driver. She's former Special Mission Support, direct embedded with Navy Special Warfare Command. Chief Beck let out a slow breath. That explains everything. I finally spoke. Those missions don't exist. Not on paper. And I'm not assigned to them anymore. Jensen nodded. That's true. You're in transition. A classified reintegration program, meant to slowly return operatives to conventional duty. Blend back into the system. Take time to decompress. And stay quiet, I said. Exactly, he confirmed. Unless absolutely necessary. And tonight? He gestured back toward the smoking base. Definitely qualifies. Boyd folded her arms. Why didn't I know about this? You weren't supposed to, he said. The program is sealed. She didn't break protocol. In fact, she followed it better than most ever do. There was silence. Not tense, just heavy. The weight of understanding finally settling across people who had underestimated me for weeks. Then Jensen looked at me directly. You've done more than enough to satisfy your rotation. You can go back. We'll arrange transport and clearance. Resume active status with Naval Special Warfare, or any assignment you request. I considered that. The old missions. The high-risk runs. The silence. The blacked-out names. But then I thought about Price. About Trask. About the medics doing their best with what they had. about how they needed someone who could show them more than they knew. I'd like to stay, I said. Finish the deployment. Teach if I can. Help them be better next time. Jensen nodded slowly. Noted. He didn't smile. People like us didn't. But there was respect in his eyes. And that was enough. Word spreads fast in a forward zone. Not official word. Not memos or orders, but whispers. Hushed retellings around fire barrels, in mess tents, between patrols. They said I took out a machine gun nest alone. That I crawled through a drainage tunnel with nothing but an M4 in nerve. That I fought like a ghost from the old wars. They weren't wrong, but they didn't know the half of it. By the end of the week, everything at Liberty had changed. Not visibly, not in a way outsiders would notice. The structures were the same. The rotations, the schedules, the dust, all unchanged. But the way people looked at me, that changed. Medics started asking me how to handle trauma under fire. Engineers asked about convoy formations. Even Trask approached me with something that might have been humility. He caught me during my morning inspection of Bluebell, one hand behind his neck like a kid caught cheating. Look, Shaw, he said. About before. I was wrong. We all were. I let him squirm a bit before answering. Yeah, you were. He chuckled, relieved at my honesty. You'd be willing to show the squad a few things? I mean, tactical movement, contact drills, that sort of thing. What you did out there, there's no textbook for that. There is, I said, standing up. But they don't let most of you read it. He blinked, then grinned. Guess you're going to translate it for us? I nodded. Gladly. So I started teaching. Unofficial at first. I held impromptu drills by the motor pool. Showed medics how to move under fire while carrying litters. Ran combat casualty simulations with real smoke and real stress. At first, only a few showed up. Then the word got out. Soon I was holding twice-weekly sessions, small unit tactics, evac under fire, how to rig gear for speed and survival. I didn't give away classified ops, but I gave them what mattered, real skills, born of real missions. No theory, just what worked when everything fell apart. Even command took notice. Lieutenant Commander Boyd dropped in during one of the sessions. She didn't interrupt, just watched. And afterward, she pulled me aside. You're not just a force multiplier, Shaw, she said. You're a culture shift. I didn't know how to take that. Still don't. But I kept showing up. Not because I wanted glory. That ship had sailed years ago. I did it because they deserved better than silence and guesses. They deserved to be taught by someone who'd seen what failure looked like, smelled like, sounded like in the dark. They deserved a fighting chance. 2 months passed. Liberty stayed on edge, but quieter. The enemy hadn't returned in force, maybe because we'd pushed them hard, or maybe because they were waiting. But tension lingered in the air like the scent of oil on hot metal. I kept running med routes. Bluebell rolled every morning. Supplies, casualties, sometimes just patrol escorts. The base depended on it, and I wasn't about to slack just because I had a hidden file. What changed was the eyes. People watch me now, not with suspicion, but attention, like they wanted to learn just by seeing how I walked a perimeter or checked a weapon, like maybe I had something worth emulating. It was strange. I wasn't used to being visible. Most of my life, I operated from shadows, wrapped in silence and sanctioned lies. I had names that never existed, used languages not on my personnel record, and crossed borders that didn't officially exist. But here, at Liberty, they wanted the truth, or at least what I could share. One night, Chief Beck pulled me aside. His hands were grease-stained, his shirt soaked in sweat. They want me to develop a curriculum, he said. Fort Lee, combat logistics and field trauma for support troops. Something real. They offered me the lead. I said no. I tilted my head. Why? Because I said I wouldn't do it unless you were my co-instructor. I laughed once, not mockingly, just surprised. You sure about that? Beck nodded. You've got more to teach than anyone I've worked with. What you did here, that's doctrine waiting to be written. I thought about it. Teaching wasn't what I signed up for. I was a ghost. A scalpel. A tool used in places where things broke, and someone had to fix it before command even noticed. But teaching? That was legacy. That was survival, not mine, but theirs. I'll need to clear it through channels, I said. You'll have support. I've already filed the recommendation. Jensen backed it. Boyd, too. That last part mattered. Boyd had gone from skeptical to quietly protective. She never broadcast my past, but she ensured no one got in the way of what I was building. Sometimes leadership isn't loud. Sometimes it just clears space for the right things to grow. I filed the paperwork to transition. It would take weeks for approvals to cycle through. So until then, I kept working, running drills, mentoring squads, hauling wounded, teaching rookies how to survive when everything hits the fan. One morning, Trask flagged me down. We're rolling to Ridgepoint in 2 hours. Supply recon, maybe hostile contact. Want to ride with us? It wasn't protocol. Medics didn't usually ride with fire teams unless tasked, but Boyd greenlit it when I asked. I think she understood. I needed to see what they'd learned. If they were ready. We rolled out in 3 MRAPs, kicking up dust under a brutal sun. Ridgepoint was a narrow pass choked with loose stone and fractured shale. An ideal kill box, and we all knew it. We reached the outpost, unloaded the pallets, and began the return. Halfway back, we got hit. The blast rocked the lead vehicle. The second barely swerved in time before gunfire erupted from the high rocks. The third, mine, skidded to a halt, boxed in from both sides. Ambush, someone yelled. Rounds pinged off armor. Smoke grenades burst along the ridge. Trask's voice cut through the radio, calm but tight. Contact left. Suppressing fire. Shaw, stay low. I ignored that last part. Instead, I popped the door, rifle ready, eyes scanning. I counted at least 6 shooters. Good positioning. Poor discipline. They bunched during reloads and exposed during movement. I slid out, rolled behind a boulder, and took position. Trask's team was returning fire better than before. Controlled bursts, covering each other. They were using formations we'd practiced. Fire and move. Stack formations. Real tactics. It was working. I spotted a pair of enemy fighters flanking toward our rear. Without hesitation, I took the shot. 2 rounds. 2 impacts. They dropped. Then silence. Enemy fire ceased. The rest melted into the rocks. 10 minutes later, it was over. The lead vehicle was damaged, but mobile. We recovered, regrouped, and rolled out with no casualties. Back at base, Trask pulled me aside. His face was flushed, but his eyes steady. They didn't panic, he said. We moved like a team, like we knew what we were doing. That's because of you. I shook my head. That's because you listened. He paused. I didn't at first. Doesn't matter, I replied. You did when it counted. Later that night, I stood by the fence line, staring out into the dark. Beyond the wire, the desert whispered its secrets. And somewhere far away, other teams like mine were preparing for their own hell. But here, now Liberty was ready. They weren't perfect, but they were no longer guessing. They had been taught. After Ridgepoint, things changed again, subtly, but permanently. The unit walked taller. It wasn't ego. It was readiness. That quiet confidence soldiers carry when they know what to do instead of hoping they'll figure it out in the moment. Medics who once froze under fire now moved with purpose. Supply drivers checked their routes like tacticians. Fire teams coordinated instead of crashing through. And I stepped back, a little at a time. My goal was never to be the hero. I'd lived that life, seen its costs. The real win was watching others succeed without needing someone like me to step in. That's when Boyd called me to her office. I received the final orders, she said. You've been cleared for transfer to Fort Lee. Co-instruction post-approved. Chief Beck's already been reassigned. They want you by next month. I nodded. It was what I'd asked for, what I'd said I wanted. But the thought of leaving Liberty stirred something heavier than I expected. You'll be missed, she added, softer. And not just because you saved our butts. I smiled. I'll miss this place too. Even the sand. She raised an eyebrow. Don't lie to your CO. Fair. My last weeks were a whirlwind. I handed off my duties, documented everything I could. I trained my replacement personally, a young combat medic named Ferris who reminded me too much of myself before the Black Ops years. Ferris listened closely. She didn't pretend to know what she didn't. She took notes, practiced late, asked the right questions. She'd do fine. I ran my last ambulance supply route just before dawn. It felt right, ending where I started. The desert stretched out, endless and silent, the rising sun turning the sky a burnt gold. Trask and Price rode with me this time. It was quiet for most of the drive, the kind of silence that only comes from shared danger and earned respect. Then Trask broke it. That night, when you crawled through that tunnel, he said, were you scared? I kept my eyes on the road. Terrified, I said honestly. But fear's just information. It tells you what matters. The only thing that counts is what you do with it. He was quiet a moment. Then, and what did you do? My job. Simple as that. On my final day, the motor pool felt different. Not in structure. The same patched asphalt, the same clang of tools and smell of diesel, but in energy. The mechanics paused what they were doing when I walked through. Gave small nods, quiet acknowledgments. They weren't salutes. They were respect. Price found me by Bluebell, checking tire pressure one last time. Just a habit now, muscle memory. You know she's not your ride anymore, right? He said. I smiled. Hard to let go. He handed me a sealed envelope. Orders. Confirmed transfer. Beck's already made noise about you designing half the new curriculum. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Price hesitated before saying, You sure about this? You could have gone back to your old unit. Kept running missions. I've run enough, I said. Now it's time to build something that lasts. He nodded, understanding. We both knew ghosts like me didn't usually get to walk away. But somehow I had. Across the lot, Trask approached with his team. No cocky swagger today. Just sincerity. Wanted to say goodbye properly, he said. We're better because of you. That's not flattery. That's fact. I shook his hand. Then each of theirs. When I reached Private Hale, the youngest of the group, he looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. So I said it for him. You'll be fine, I said. Just remember, don't look for heroes. Be the one who moves when others freeze. He nodded, swallowing hard. As I climbed into the Humvee that would take me to the airstrip, I looked back one last time. At Liberty Outpost. At Bluebell. At the people who'd started as skeptics and become warriors. Not because I saved them. Because I taught them how to save each other. That was the point. That was the mission. And as the vehicle rolled out through the gates, I realized something else. Maybe, just maybe, that was the legacy I'd been fighting for all along. Fort Lee was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature, though the wind bit harder than the Afghan desert, but in pace. Everything moved slower. Safer. Cleaner. Like a machine without urgency. But I didn't mind. They gave me an office. A whiteboard. A class schedule. Students in pressed uniforms who didn't know what I'd done, only what I could teach. Most assumed I was just another instructor with field time. None knew about the ridge, or the culvert, or the silence I'd lived in for years. And that was fine by me. We built the program from scratch. Chief Beck and I spent long nights designing modules. Combat trauma care in hostile zones. Convoy tactics under indirect fire. How to adapt civilian protocols to battlefield chaos. It was hard, demanding work. But it felt right. Because for the first time, I wasn't just preparing for war. I was preparing others. Some days I'd catch glimpses of who I used to be. In the way I arranged a med kit. In how I paused before entering a room. Muscle memory checking corners. That part of me would never fully go away. But now it had a place. I got letters from Liberty every so often. Updates from Price. Reports from Trask. They were doing well. Stronger. More prepared. One letter came with a photo. Bluebell, freshly painted, with a small name stenciled under the passenger side window. Shaw Standard. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Later that week, I stepped into class and found a room full of young troops waiting with notebooks open. Ready to learn. Ready to listen. I picked up a marker and wrote one line across the board. Fear is just information. It tells you what matters. Then I turned to face them. My name is Staff Sergeant Riley Shaw, I said. I've been a driver, a medic, a ghost in wars you won't find in textbooks. But today, I'm here to make sure that when your moment comes, when the world turns to fire and chaos, you move, and you fight, and you win. Let's begin. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.